Good morning, Magic players. Welcome to the morning show where we discuss all things Magic the Gathering. Get your questions fired up because we're going to have a fantastic guest this morning. Also, we do Decklist reviews. So if you got a 75 you'd like some feedback on, submit it to us, and both myself and the community would love to give some feedback. So brew up your cups of coffee and let's brew up some magic. Welcome to Coffee and MTG for April 23rd, 2021. I am your host, Nikachu, the Merfolk Master. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Andreas, Straw Boss, MTG Ectoplasm, Dan, Fading Light, Dylan, Bird, Brian, Steven, MTG Box, Rutacell, Pan Fried, Dream Purple, Galactic Center Core, Carlos, and Papa Constant Pool. Yeah, robots. You know what's coming. If you haven't already checked out the the title of today's video, we do have a very special guest. And on an archetype I'd love to talk about, because as people have asked me over and over again on this show, they always ask me, what is one of the more underrated decks in Modern? And I keep saying that it is Hardened Scales Affinity. I mean, outside of Karn the Great Creator, there is almost no artifact hate in the metagame. And people kept talking like, oh, the deck is dead. They banned Mox Opal. But that was one of the few artifact decks that didn't even leverage that card all that much. It was mostly a synergy-based deck you can still kill on turn 4. So I would love to welcome on the show today, MrSeri MTG. Welcome.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, you're welcome. I'd love to talk all about Hardened Scale. So for people who do not know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So yeah, I am MrSeri MTG. I make YouTube videos for Hardened Scales and also stream on Twitch. You can see it over there. I am relatively new into making content, start around 8 months ago, 10 months ago. Yeah, I've been playing Magic for not so long. I actually started playing in January 2019.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, now I played. But back in when I was 9 years old, so around 20 years ago, I also played some Magic. So that was my first, let's say, contact with the game. But now until recently, I didn't get back into it. And Hardened Scales is probably the first competitive deck that I picked up after that. So yeah.
When did you pick up Hardened Scales Affinity?
So it was actually, I had been playing a lot of other games, since I was a kid. And I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively with some friends, and then also with some friends. And some of those friends still play Magic. So I asked them, could I play some Magic with you around January 2019? And actually, the first deck that I got to play of Magic nowadays was Merfolk, because my friend is a big fan of Merfolk. So I thought Merfolk versus Fairies.
I've sucked in a lot of people through Merfolk, but they've swam to different shores over time.
Exactly. So I got really into it. I mean, I was completely hooked. So I started reading all possible strategy articles, watching all sorts of YouTube content, and eventually came across this Hardened Scales article on Channel Fireball, which is called something. The ultimate guide to Hardened Scales Affinity. And I was like, whoa, this deck looks cool, because I have no idea what it's doing. Like, it took me a bit to understand what Tron was trying to do until I actually read the Tron lands. I was like, how is this deck a deck? But for Hardened Scales, it took me a really long time to understand what the hell was going on. And then, I decided to pick up the deck kind of in a whim. And I gave myself the deck, all the parts of that time. It was still Mox Opal. Mox Opal was still a legal card, right? So... And that's around June 2019. That's when I started playing the deck, and I've been playing it ever since. Maybe a short break when they banned Mox Opal, out of grief mostly. But yeah,
that's what happens. No one likes it when cards get banned from their deck. Definitely Maybe quick question for all the naysayers out there: how important was Mox Opal to the archetype? You're still winning with it. Before we go too far, I mean, I gotta illustrate, like, this guy knows how to win with the deck. I mean, we've got a lot of results in the last few months, but also, we have top 16 finishes in Modern challenges. Also different variations. You've got like Naya Hardened Scales. I'm sure we can get into that later. But even with traditional Golgari Hardened Scales, we have a slew of 5-0s. So like, you're definitely proficient with the deck. You know what you're doing. So I'd love to So anyway, I'd love to hear your take on the banning of Mox Opal. How much
Oh,
did
yeah.
it really take away from the archetype?
So it did take away some, especially some speed, right? Because nowadays it's pretty hard to kill somebody on turn 3 with hardened skills. You normally kill, you're looking for more a turn 4 kill, whereas when Mox Opal was legal, you could aim for a faster kill, right? Because basically the good turn for hardened skills is turn basically when you have 4 mana. That allows you to play 2 2-drops, or you play your Ravager and activate your Ingmoth Nexus. That's normally your faster kill, right? So Mox Opal just made that a bit faster. But at the same
so
time,
it actually took away some turn 3 kills.
Exactly.
That's that actually is a big deal. I'll concede that you want to kill fast, because if you don't kill them by turn 3, they might kill you by turn 3. There's a lot of decks like that in Modern.
Exactly. But I mean, of course, the deck adapted afterwards, and we tried all sorts of different things in the Hardened Skills Facebook group that I was part of at that time. We mostly looked at Ether Vial, Null Hierarch, trying to play Embry, because that was one of the reasons that Mox Opal maybe got banned. And none of these things maybe made as much sense until Ikoria brought 3 very important cards to the archetype. But yeah, the basic thing that Mox Opal did was basically to accelerate your mana and also allow you to have artifact synergies, right? Because it basically allow you to sacrifice, like it was a land you could sacrifice to Ravager, and it was basically a land you could play more than one of in one turn. So you could play a Mox Opal, tap it for mana, activate your Ingmoth Nexus, sacrifice it, play another Mox Opal, and have another mana to do whatever you wanted. I don't know, tap your Hangabog Walker, and then start making the calculations that you talked about in that video. So
yes, I mean, I know one thing, talking to a lot of Hardened Scales players, they love the math. I mean, if you don't like math, this might not be the deck for you, because you do have to do actual calculation. Okay, if I sack this many artifacts, how many counters do I get? Is that enough for a kill? And then boom, you got to go for it. So there are those moments in the game where the Hardened Scales player will just sink a bunch of time making sure they win, and then they win.
Exactly. So you should be afraid if you're playing as a Hardened Scale player and you see him counting. Actually, something I try not to do. Something I try not to do on paper, because it gives away the fact that you may have a kill. So I try to kind of keep a mental count of how many counters do I have available. Like at some point it becomes second nature. You just see the kill more or less happening. So it's not a good idea to start counting the kill right in front of your opponent, because your opponent maybe go like, "Oh, this guy has something better not tap out." You can also try to fool your opponent this way, just pretending you have a kill or not. But that's just,
if you can keep it all track in your head the entire time, that's a sign of a master, in my opinion. How about this? Let's go over a quick deck tech over this deck, because honestly, it hasn't had a spotlight in a long time. I mean, especially after the ban, it started seeing less play, especially when, like, what's it called? Fire Design really was starting to take over, and then they banned Mox Opal, and then we didn't see it at all. So for people who are not really familiar with this deck, let's go through it.
Yeah, we can definitely go through it. So
I guess this is your latest list.
Yeah, this is probably my latest list. I really favor having a lot of one-offs on my list, just because I find some people disagree, but I find that it's better to only draw one of the not so good cards instead of drawing 2. And if I don't draw them, I don't care so much. But basically, the core of the deck is an artifact synergy deck that is aggressive in nature. But unlike other aggressive decks like Burn, doesn't have a time bomb or a time limit to itself. So you can win games turn 10, turn 12. I've beaten blue-white players very late in the game. I've beaten Uro when they have resolved Uro many times, because the deck has a lot of grind to it. And the main plan is to use Arban Ravager and Hardened Skills, which basically have this combination of every time you sack an artifact, instead of getting 1 counter into Arban Ravager, you will get 2 counters into Arban Ravager. Right. And when you sacrifice a lot of artifacts, you, of course, will put a lot of counters into Ravager, which then can move those counters to either a Walking Ballista or an Ingmoth Nexus. That's normally the 2 main avenues of kills. Also, you can kill people with making a bunch of top decks with a Hangabog Walker. That is, let's say, the main game plan. But as you can see, there's a lot of other pieces we didn't really talk about, like Arban Workers, animation modules, all those cards, right? But the card that made Scales go from, let's say, when Mox Opal got banned, it definitely went down in popularity and power a lot. But then Ikoria came over, and I had no hopes for the archetype at the time. But they printed 3 very important cards for Hardened Scales. The most important of them being the Ozolith. The Ozolith is a legendary artifact from Ikoria. But basically, whenever a creature leaves the battlefield, and it's very nice that it says leaves the battlefield, that you control, whatever counters there are on those creatures will go into the Ozolith. And then at the beginning of combat, you can move those counters to a creature. Can be a creature you control, a creature your opponent controls. You can do some funny stuff with Soulscar Mage and negative counters, like -1 counters with the Ozolith. But this basically does for Hardened skills is it basically doubles the amount of counters that you have. So you sacrifice a worker, and you get modular 1 into a creature, but now you get also a counter on the Ozolith. This works like this. So now you basically turn your 1 counter into 2 counters, right? And this is just pretty busted. If you combine Hardened skills, Ravager, Ozolith, and a Ballista, it's very easy to generate a kill because only with the Ravager, you're already putting 6 counters. So just sacrificing the Ravager to itself, you're already putting 6 counters on a walking Ballista, which is just, having an 8/8 Ballista out of nowhere. I mean, it's something that Sean is aspiring to do, but they're not really getting there, They're getting more into the 4/4, 5/5 Ballistas. They're like the 8/8, 12/12 Ballistas, they belong to Hardened skills. Yeah. So this will be a bit of course, the other cards that are printed in Ikoria that were extremely important to the deck success has been Lurus of the Dream Den. I was, when I saw the card, I saw, well, this is basically no restriction for us. And even I read it as a card that said spells, but it says permanence, which doesn't change for us, but I think the card would have been a bit more fair if it said spells. But anyhow, there's only one card we don't get to play with Lurus in our deck, which is Scrapyard Recombiner, which is a card from Modern Horizons that did not, let's say, it's not that strong anyway, so I don't like it so much. Lurus, on the other hand, is super strong, synergizes with the whole deck, and it gives you flood insurance and something to do with your graveyard. Back in the day, you had nothing in your graveyard as a Hardened skills player, and now you can leverage Lurus to. I had opponents bring like Soulguy Lantern versus me, which does nothing versus scales. It only stops Lurus. Just because Lurus is so strong, sometimes people even bring Graveyard Heritage against it. Yeah.
Gotcha. What are the matchups you think Lurus is best against?
Definitely control decks and mid-rangey decks. I think actually Lurus is pretty unfair against any deck that is mid-range in nature. Because not only does it draw a card when you pay 3 mana, like if you compare it to something like Armage's Charm, right? You pay 3 mana to draw 2 cards, so you turn 1 card into 2. So basically you gain 1 life, one card. With Lurus, you gain 1 card basically for free at any time. Of course, it's not an instant, but it's really, really strong to get an extra card. And then when you play it, you on top of that get a card. You can cast a Hang of a Walker on top. So you're now 2 cards up and your opponent. And on top of that, a lot of the skill threats, by nature how counters work, even if they, for example, Fatal Push them, you still get some advantage out of it.
Yeah.
So if you resolve a Lurus and you get back a Hang of a Walker, and your opponent is trying to beat you with trading 1/1 like a Fatal Push, for example, or a Path to Exile, even if Lurus dies immediately, which is the most common fate for Lurus, you still are in a commanding position for that game.
Right. I'd love to discuss some of these one-ofs. Why the 1-Steel Overseer?
All right, so I mean, Steel Overseer is probably, like in this article I mentioned before, like the first article I read about Hardened skills, the guy said, don't play Overseer, it's terrible. The modern has changed a lot since. Some people like to play. You could even
argue it's even worse today because of Gut Shot, Lava Dart, other walking ballistas. I mean, it's actually more vulnerable than it ever has been, to be honest.
Exactly. So Steel Overseer is an extremely vulnerable card that is best played on turn 2 when you're on the play. Like that is the moment where it shines, because your opponent, if they didn't leave mana up, which a lot of times happens nowadays in Modern, people don't go like turn 1 shock for leaving up a bolt. They have a choice there. They either lead with a Steel Overseer, like deal with Steel Overseer in any way, or they do whatever they wanted to do in the first place, to play a Tarmogoyf or whatever. If they don't deal with the Steel Overseer, you run away with the game, because the card is just that strong, right? Just also nowadays with the Ozolith, Steel Overseer has modular. With the Ozolith, when you tap it, you put counters on itself, and before they used to be wasted, but now you sacrifice Steel Overseer, it goes into the Ozolith, right? So that is why I only play 1, because I almost never want to see this card. And in my opinion, when you draw the 7 cards, well, I don't think it's an opinion. Basically, your initial hand contains a lot of games with Hardened skills, and before you get to see 3 or 4 more cards in your deck. Like it will end by turn 4 or turn 5. So most of the time, if it's not in your initial hand, you will not draw it later on, right? And the first one is infinitely better than the second or the third one. Just imagine, in like later in the game versus an opponent has a lot of mana and a lot of cards, you play a Steel Overseer, and the card dies immediately, generates no value. when it dies, unlock all the other cards. So yeah, Steelworth Seer, definitely a card that gets sided out a lot when there's lava darts and gut shots and ballistas involved. But on the play, especially against anybody that is light on removal, and especially on game 1, it's a really, really strong card. So I like to play that.
How about Metallic Mimic?
Metallic Mimic is in a similar boat. Metallic Mimic is best against our bad matchups because it allows us to kind of my camera's doing things. It allows us to kind of bombate our hand. You can play Metallic Mimic and name Construct, and then you can cast your Walking Ballistas and Hangavax for X = 0, and that will, when they come into play, even though they had 0 counters from the mana that you spend on it, they will come in with a counter on. So that allows you, for example, to go turn 1 Scales, turn 2 Mimic, Ballista Hangavax, and then you have like 3 creatures that are all 2/2s or 2/1s in the case of Mimic. And that allows you to, for example, kill combo opponents. They're not so common anymore, but they are sometimes. Sometimes against Strong, that's very good. And against anybody that's, has inevitability against you. So that somebody that will, for example, kill you turn 4 or turn 5. Good against Upward Titan, which is one of our bad matchups, for example. So again, it's not a card you want to see a lot of. It has some minor synergies with Animation Module. Well, there are good synergies with Animation Module and Hangavax Walker, because you can name Topter or Servo, and those will come in with counters when they come into play. But it's not a card I like to see a lot of copies. And I'm, again, very happy when I see the first copy in my opening hand. But if I don't see the whole match, I don't care. It also gets sided out a lot. And the one of Spellskite, similar situation. I found it, I don't really want to draw 2. The life total kind of matters at some point. And also it's a card that doesn't really progress our plan. It just protects our plan. So there is a tension there of how many cards you dedicate to protect your plan and how many cards you dedicate to stop your opponent's plan. And of course, Spellskite is at its best when you're fighting Lightning Bolt decks or the Temporal Rage decks, because you can redirect the Temporal Rage. It's also very good in the mirror. It's also very good because you can steal the modeler from your opponent. So normally Spellskite is GG if you get to play it. So that is kind of the reason I'm playing so many one-offs. Also, is a one-off Throne of Geth there. Traditionally, we would play 2, but I play only 1 because the way Modern is going right now. People are trading a lot, so much removal. A lot of people playing 4 Battle Pushes, 4 Lightning Bolts. So you don't have a lot of material to sacrifice to Throne of Geth. So sometimes it's very good. It's very good against Chalice of the Void. But in general, it's not a card you want to draw 2 in your opening hand, and then probably you will not get as much advantage from 2 as you would do from 1. And of course, you will play 4 Ancient Steerings. So all your one-offs, you can find them if you need them.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. So even, and they all come out on turn 2 anyway. So you have a really good shot at finding them on curve when you start off with Ancient Stirrings.
Exactly. Which is not maybe the most powerful start skills can have, like turn 1. Turn 1, I would rather be casting 100 Scales or a Nozzles or an Animation Module. But it's a start, and it's something to do from turns 3 onwards. It's one of the best spells in the game. There's been a lot of discussion in the 100 Skills Discord about the value of Ancient Stirrings lately, because some people, myself included, sometimes I don't play 4 in my lists.
Gotcha. Okay, I think for people, for everyone watching live, get your Hardened Scales questions coming. I mean, if it's anything about Merfolk, you can ask me on Monday. We've got a Hardened Scales master here, and we've got some really, and he can give some really good insight to this archetype. So we have a lot of opportunity to learn. But I think one question I think a lot of people are going to want to know is, if they pick this deck up, what are going to be the good matchups? What are going to be the bad matchups? What can they expect?
That's a great question you should ask yourself when you pick up a deck. But the good matchups are always creature-based matchups. So if you have a friend like mine, that I have a friend that plays Merfolk, and you want to beat on that,
playing against this,
Hardened Scales is a great choice until they start playing Unsettled Marinir or something like this. But so basically, any creature-based matchup. I think I have an insane record against Heliod decks.
Wow, that is a reason in itself to be picking up this deck. Heliod, as we are talking right now, the whole deck is still legal as we are speaking here on February 23rd, 2021, is taking over Modern in big numbers. This is a very big reason to pick up this deck. Tell us more.
Exactly, because you have two main ways to attack the Heliod matchup. One is to try to prevent them from comboing, and the other one is to have an alternative win condition that doesn't take up life, right? This deck has both, because when you have a big ballista, like a 4/4 ballista or a 3/3 ballista, your opponent can combo through that. like the classic play of cocoing into Spike Feeder and I win, that doesn't happen versus Skills very much. And even if that happens, you have Inmoth Nexus. And they have very little instant speed interaction that can affect Inmoth Nexus because Skyclave Evaporation doesn't hit Inmoth Nexus. So they have actually game one. There's nothing they can do. I've gone so many times all in versus green white heal, knowing there's nothing they can do to stop Inmoth Nexus.
Mm-hmm.
There's no flyers. There's no only walking ballista from them. But definitely, like, if they are walking ballista and a healer, they're probably dead anyway, right? But Inmoth Nexus is like, just basically just wins the game. And even if they have walking ballista, you can play around it very easily because if you play Skills, you'll play some mirrors eventually, and you'll learn how to play around walking ballista. So I would say the healer is a good matchup. Any creature-based matchup is definitely good. Humans is a very good matchup, or a pretty decent matchup. I beat on control decks very regularly. I don't know if it's a sample size or the fact that they don't know how to play against me, but that is definitely a strength of the deck, that nobody knows how to play against it. So that's obviously, if you're playing against less experienced players, if you're expecting a big tournament where there's a lot of uncertainty, Skills is a good choice too. So
it's really hard to play around. I think it's really hard to play around everything in Hardened Scales, like from a control player's perspective. Like the game can play out in so many different ways. And even as maybe I don't really have to calculate it that much because I'm a Merfolk player and I just get steamrolled anyway. But I should, in theory, keep track of all the different ways that you can kill me. And it's just very hard to play game theory optimal. I don't know, from a control player's perspective. And you have more information than they do, so that probably gives Hardened Scales an advantage in that domain.
Exactly. So I mean, of course, you also have access to, you're playing green, so you have access to Veil of Summer. That really puts a dent on those decks. When they're trying to do something like Cryptic Command, bounce something, or Armage's Charm. Like the way they usually beat you is by Armage's Charming, Hangavag Walker, and trying to steal it from themselves. Because Hangavag Walker, kind of sacrifice itself like a walking ballista can. Yep. And the way you prevent this is by using Veil of Summer a lot of times, or by just sacrificing it, of course, using a Sac Outlet. So I have a very good record against blue-white control. Also very good against Esper control. But yeah, that is normally a good matchups, I believe. Bad matchups are normally combo decks that are non-creatures. And Nothing used to be a terrible matchup. I was like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, if Walking Ballista is bad, probably Hardened Scales is not a good matchup for it, right? So if you play a 2/2 Ballista and your opponent's like, sure, I will just kill you with my Tassa's Oracle combo. Yeah. Like you're not winning that matchup probably. I mean, you can win it because you can, you have 15 cards on your sideboard that you can use for those bad matchups. But reality is that Announcing was a bad matchup. Amulet Titan is a bad matchup. And bad matchups are generally bad because it's not only that you need to play well and that you need to play around what they're doing, but also it's depending on what they're drawing. And if your opponent is drawing turn 3 Titan on Amulet Titan, there's very little you can do because they can always tutor for a Ghost Quarter.
Oh, okay.
And, with a combination of Ghost Quarter, Boreal Grazer, all that, you can also tutor for a Fetchland and a Valakut to stop you from making a big Ballista. So they also play Engineer Explosives main deck. So Amulet Titan is one of the worst matchups, but it's winnable. Like I don't think there's any decks, like unlike other decks, which I feel they are a bit lopsided matchups, you can actually you can beat almost everyone with Skills, but you need to be much better at Hardened Skills than they are understanding what Hardened Skills is doing. So you can beat them just because they what's up. I've done that a lot. But you need to really be much better at understanding what's happening. Like you cannot be sitting there and missing lethal one turn because maybe the next turn they will just slam a Titan and kill you. So normally, yeah, those are the matchups I consider bad. Nowadays, I consider of the top matchups, which are, in my opinion, Blue-Red Prowess, John Shadow, and Heliot. John Shadow and UR Prowess are not that great. Especially John Shadow, I have had a bit of a hard time lately because you're good at presenting a lot of blockers, but they also have Morval Rage in their deck, right?
Yes.
And that's
why they run it.
That's why they run it, right? So John Shadow has been tough. I used to have a really good record against Shadow decks, but now they play Tarmogoyf, and I'm really happy. I've seen on Twitter some people are not playing Tarmogoyf anymore. Just keep doing that. It's not good. Don't play Tarmogoyf. Basically before they would have like one Shadow and maybe that was what you had to deal with. But now they have Shadow, Scourge, and Tarmogoyf.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
all those cards outsize your creatures big time. And on top of that, they have all the discard suit, all the removal suit. They have Colline's Command sometimes. They have Kozilek's Return on the side. That's a hard matchup. I haven't had a great success with it versus it. And your prowess is extremely dependent on the level of their draw. I've beaten them many times, but they also beaten me sometimes where I felt there was nothing I could have done. And I think that's just the nature of the deck, right? I think everybody feels the same. Yeah. Sometimes they will go turn 1 Soulscar Mage, turn 2 Stormwing Entity, turn 3 kill you, right? And then, I mean, you could play John Shadow. I guess that's a decent matchup for, your prowess is a decent matchup for John Shadow, but for your prowess. But it's, for Hardened Scales, it's not an easy matchup to beat your prowess, consistently at least.
Gotcha. All right, let's go look at some questions from the audience. We're already starting off with a super chat. MTG Ectoplasm, the Spirits content creator, wants to know, what is a tougher matchup, Azorius or Bant Spirits, and which spirit gives your deck a hard time?
So definitely, there are 2 spirits that give Hardened Scales a hard time. I'll answer the question in reverse. Sure. Spell Queller and Skyclave Apparition. Those are the cards that I'm always looking out for, because basically Spell Queller, if you Spell Queller Ballista or Hangavak, the card is as good as gone. So the downside of Spell Queller is no downside when you are exiling a Hangavak or a Ballista. So I always try to play around.
Right, yeah, they're all 0 mana.
They're all 0 mana, so they don't come back into play. And then, of course, Skyclave Apparition is just extremely good for the same reason. You can exile Hardened Scales, you can exile the Ozolith, but you can also exile the 0-drops, and then you don't get the benefit out of them. So normally, I am more afraid of the banned version because you're playing 4 Cocos, I'm assuming, most of the time, or 3 Cocos. I've seen some lists that play. You have more access to those cards, right? And you can do that at instant speed. I know you have the is it called Rattle Chains that gives you flash to your... Is it Rattle Chains that gives flash?
Yeah, Rattle Chains gives flash.
And then you can flash in Skyclave Apparition. But normally, Rattle Chains dies very quickly because it's a 1 toughness creature. Yep. But the issue that when I lose versus Spirits is normally they would go something like, not do much, turn 1 or 2, may play 1 or 2 Spirits, and then hold up Spell Queller. And then I need to be pretty smart how I play it, right? Because if I just jam I think a lot of people lose control games and versus Spirits games because it's just jam their X-drop versus open mana versus Spell Queller versus a mana leak. They lose it there. And then from there, you have a board, and then you play a Lord. And that's very hard then to beat you because Walking Ballista, it's very bad versus Lords. Like, also the way you lose versus Merfolk, or you beat Hardened Scales with Merfolk, is not to play your creatures 1 at a time, but rather kind of try to swarm the board so you have 3 Lords at the same time, and then Walking Ballista becomes much worse, right? That's what my strategy versus Spirits is, to try to kill them as they come. So not let them build the board. And I think that's a good strategy in general against Spirits. But yeah, definitely the banned version has given me more headaches. The downside of the banned version is that you're playing Noble Hierarch, and Noble Hierarch, like any mana dork, is pretty bad against Scales in general.
Yeah, just snipe it down with 1 Walking Ballista counter.
But yeah, it's a good question. Definitely Spirits is not a super easy matchup. Of all the creature tribal matchups, is probably the worst because of Spell Queller and Skyclave Apparition. Even though nowadays Goblins, they can kill you turn 3 for some fire purpose, like the reason. They also becoming a bit worse than they used to because now they can kill you turn 3 and that with a 2/2. So it's like, sometimes a bit hard to stop.
Gotcha. But, we got Pan Fried. I have a friend who wants to get into Hardened Scales. What is the best artifact hate? Laugh my ass off. So what is? Yeah, let's get into the artifact. Well, how to beat Hardened Scales basically with sideboard cards.
I mean, it depends on, of course, which colors you're playing, but I think, there are actually one of the best cards against Hardened Scales ever printed, and I'm very happy it doesn't see a lot of play, is Kaya Orzhov Usurper, which is a 3-mana Planeswalker that comes in with, I believe, 3 loyalty, and the -1 exiles permanent with converted mana cost 1 or less. Exactly.
I think this is one of the most underrated Planeswalkers right now.
This card is so good. I'm really happy it doesn't see more play. This card, basically exiles, scales, exiles all our creatures. It's a big beat down. And of course, you have all the hate that Wizards has been very keen in printing artifact hate recently. They printed Collector Roof and Karn the Great Creator. There's obviously good cards against scales, but you need to realize we have played a lot of matches versus both Collector Roof and Karn the Great Creator. I think Eldrazi Tron is a pretty decent matchup for Hardened skills, even though they main deck for Karn the Great Creators. You can still lose because they can turn 3 Karn, but we have a lot of ways to beat on them in spite of Karn, especially with the card, some of the cards from Ikoria. But
like the Ozolith,
the Ozolith, and especially Gemraiser.
Anyway.
Gemraiser is one of the best cards against Karn the Great Creator ever printed. And you can see my list that you saw before. I'm playing Gemraiser even though it stops me from having Lurus if I put it in my deck. So this is how good Gemraiser is, that I'm willing not to use Lurus when I bring it in. And I know it may sound vanilla, but if you cast Gemraiser for its mutate cost, you can put it on top of your X cost creatures, like a Walking Ballista. Now, 2 things happen. First, you get a trigger to destroy an artifact or an enchantment, so you can kill their Snare Breaches, Pithing Needles, Liquid Metal Coatings, Walking Ballistas, whatever. But then on top of that, because Walking Ballista is a 0/0 with counters on, then if you put Gemraiser on top, you have a 4/4 plus all the counters that Walking Ballista had. So if it was a 2/2, now you have a 6/6 trample rich creature that has still all the abilities of Walking Ballista, and it's not an artifact. Importantly, it's not an artifact. So now you can activate Gemraiser to use the ability of Walking Ballista to pin your opponent's Karn the Great Creator. On top of that, it also plays around Pithing Needle. Gemraiser is not Walking Ballista when Gemraiser is on top. It's just Gemraiser.
Oh, that is a sneaky interaction.
Yeah, exactly. So if you name Pithing Needle with Walking Ballista, your opponent can Gemraiser on top, and then the Pithing Needle doesn't work anymore. And it becomes also a +4/+4. So it becomes a, 8/8 trample reach that has haste, or because the Walking Ballista was in play. And on top of that, they have the ability of Walking Ballista to pin you to death. So Gemraiser makes the Karn the Great Creator matchup much better if you have it on your deck. But
so
answering your question,
this is almost mandatory. Would you say this is mandatory to have in people's sideboards? Because Karn the Great Creator is going to be with us for a long time.
Yeah, this guy's not going to oversell it. Yes, I would say so. It depends on how many Karn the Great Creators you're expecting. But in general, it's a good card in general. Like the fact that you can get a creature, give a creature +4/+4 and trample. You basically can sacrifice your whole board to a Walking Ballista, make a 10/10, put Gemraiser on top, and now you have a 14/14 that has trample. And then just basically win.
And you destroyed something.
Exactly, you destroy something on the process. So I love the card. I love that it's like very, very it's representative of what it's doing, destroying things, and I think it's really, really good. I think you should play this card if you're playing Hardened skills. You shouldn't be playing Nature's Claim. Also, Nature's Claim kind of defeats the purpose of playing Artifact Hate because it gets stopped by Chalice on 1. So a lot of the decks that playing artifacts versus you, they also have Chalice, especially Eldrazi Tron. So Nature's Claim is really bad against Eldrazi Tron, and Gemraiser is really good against Eldrazi Tron. So bring in your Gemraisers, people. Also, if you mutate into a Gemraiser, you get 2 triggers of the Gemraiser. So you can mutate the Gemraiser on top of another Gemraiser and kill 2 artifacts. I've done that versus like Dice Factory, where they have like more than 1 Snaring Breach.
Yeah, whenever this creature mutates.
Exactly. Mutates means both mutating on something and being mutated on, which is super complex ruling. It took me a while to understand. But yeah, that is like, I would say Kaior's of Usurper if you want to beat on scales. And one card I found very hard to beat recently, it's been both Vapor Snack, because it's a 1-mana instant that just, of course, Stony Silence. I mean, that's classic, right? But Vapor Snack is actually a really good card against scales because bouncing a creature, even though you get the counters on the Ozolith and everything, when you are making one creature that's very big, and if you don't have the Ozolith and they bounce it, you basically have lost it because now you have a Walking Ballista that when you recast is a 2/2 or a 1/1 instead of the 10/10 that was on the battlefield, right? So bouncing effects, cheap bouncing effects like these are good. I think these are a bit outside the box. Of course, Collector Roof and Stony Silence are great, right? But I think that's the cards that are secretly very good against scales, and it's a bit one of the reasons why your prowess is sometimes not such a good matchup.
So, like, how big of a deal is this? Because this, as far as I'm concerned, is the only roadblock in, well, maybe not the only one. I mean, there's some meta problems like prowess and Death Shadow, like you said, but like, this might be the only real hate card against Hardened Scales, and it sounds like to you it's not really that big of a deal.
No, I mean, of course, the Ozolith also helped, as you said, because the Ozolith is not an activated ability; it's a triggered ability, right? So it triggers at the beginning of combat. So that means that you can, even through Stony Silence or Counter Creator or Collector Roof, you can still get, move counters around or put counters on things. On top of that, we also play a certain amount, depending on how much Artifact Gate there is in the match, in the metagame. I play from 1 to 3 Phyrexia Score, which is a card nobody knows about, but it's a land. You can have a look at the list. It's basically a land.
I know it's this card. Oh, Phyrexia.
It's Phyrexia, like from Phyrexia. Or like,
Phyrexia.
The core of Phyrexia, basically. So this card says, pay 1, tap it, sacrifice an artifact, you gain 1 life. And this card is so vanilla that nobody plays it really. But it's really great because it's a sack outlet that works around artifact hate. So when you get your Collector Roof out, if I have a Phyrexia Score, I can still sacrifice my Hangabog Walker. I still get those counters on the Ozolith, and I still get to put them on a top tier the next turn. So if you mulligan to 4 to get a Collector Roof out, don't be surprised if your opponent just beat you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I would say the best artifact hate is the artifact hate that kind of makes sense in your deck. And of course, you can play a lot of Collector Roofs and a lot of Stony Silences, but this is a very small percentage of games you're going to get to use them that you're not playing against Hardened Scales. So playing things like Kaya, Orso of Usurper, Colligans, Kozilek's Return is actually a really good card as well, because it kills all 2 mana or less, like 2 toughness or less creatures.
Right.
And that gets you, especially because an instant it can get you when you go for a kill with Hangabog Walker. When you make a lot of top tiers. Yeah, it's a very popular card, and it's also very popular right now when like the jump players are playing it. And you need to play around this card because this card will kill all the top tiers that you have, or even kill, if you have a small board without Ravager, you can lose all your creatures.
Mm-hmm. Here, we got a great question here. Can you explain combat math in Hardened Scales in 30 minutes or less? But maybe a better way to explain this. What are some shortcuts I think people should learn when playing this deck? Are there any like heuristics that you could throw at us?
Yeah, very quickly. So you need to think that every time you move a counter with Hardened Scales, if you would move 1 counter, you move 2 counters, right? So that means if you have 3 artifacts that you want to sacrifice, normally you get 3 counters on your Ravager. Now you get 6 counters on your Ravager.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the basics, the basic math. And on top of that, if you have Modular, you also get 1 extra counter. So you have a Ravager and a Worker. You always need to think, and both of them are 2/2s. You will not get a 6/6 Ravager after you sacrifice the Worker and Modular onto the Ravager. You will get a 7/7 because the 2 counters from the Worker will become 3 when they move into the Ravager. And that's kind of that's where the broken of Hardened Scales comes in, right? Because you realize there, you're basically ramping very fast. You're going from having you spend 3 mana to have a 7/7, if you look at it. 2 cards, of course. So what I like to do when I'm thinking of scales is count how many counters you have available. So if you look at you look at the Hangabog Walker, you always have the Hangabog Walker represents 1 counter, and the top tier represents 1 counter, right? So you have 4 counters on a Hangabog Walker. In reality, you have 5 counters. So I look at those, and I look at how many workers I have. Workers are always counting for 2 because it's the counter that you sacrifice, and it's the counter they get to. And if you have Hardened Scales on top of this, you just need to double. So you have a 4/4 Hangabog. You don't have 5 counters anymore. You have 10 counters at this point. Then if you have a Ozolith on top of that, you need to double the double. Right, so you go from having, 5 counters to having 10 counters to having around 15 counters on top of that, or 16 counters probably. So that's basically what I'm trying to do. Is I'm looking at my board and I'm kind of remembering how many creatures do I have and how many counters do I have. The best way to learn this is to get your lift up Hardened Scales deck, which never leaves my side, and just play a bunch with it. Just. Like you can, of course, proxy it. You can go to Magic Online and just play versus yourself and just play a lot and realize that you will start seeing some patterns. like the sacrifice Worker to Ravager, the sacrifice Hangavac to Ravager, that it will start making sense. And then the most complicated lines are normally involving Throne of Geth, Animation Module, Ravager, Double Ravager, Ozolis, all those cards together. Of course, it gets complicated, and I stop and count, basically. I think that is the main thing. I just literally, when I have so many things that it's hard to keep track, I just stop and count. Give yourself 10 seconds. It's worth it a lot of times. And a lot of times you will actually find kills you were not even expecting. It's so funny that you just sit down for a second, you're like, oh man, I think I have lethal. Like the instinct comes easily to me now. But the fact that the counting needs to happen anyway, because the worst thing you can do with scales is to go all in on a Nexus and be short for one, right? So that's what I do. I try to count how many artifacts I have and how many skills you have. And basically, you have 2 skills. You need to multiply how many artifacts you have times 3, basically. That's the basic math. But of course, I mean, I think somebody in the Hardened Skills Discord is coming up with some formulas that you can apply to your, you can apply to calculate exactly how many counters. And I guess you could have that in a secondary screen or something. But I'm more of a old school guy, I start like, this is the amount of counters. But it also comes with experience, just having experience with the deck, seeing the lines many times. Counting. That's what I did when I picked up the deck. I just kept playing versus myself. You play 4 or 5 turns and you just realize, okay, can I kill right now? How many counters do I have? And I try to think, fast, or I think I have 8, and then I count. And if I have 14, I realize that I was missing something there, right? And then you kind of update your beliefs as you go more and more. So kind of becoming iterative with it.
Right. Lawrence Dale asks, which is the best flavor of scales, mono green, Selesnya, or Golgari? Or maybe the better question is, why is Golgari the better than the other 2?
Of course, yeah. I mean, of course, mono green, it's my favorite. It was always the card, originally Scales was mostly a mono green deck because you had Mox Opal. You had to play Darksteel Citadel, you had to play Welding Jars to enable it. Nowadays, most likely Golgari is the better one because you have access to the best removal in Modern, as I saw the interview with Shendrek. If you're playing Modern right now, you should be playing Fatal Push if you have the option. It's just simply the best removal spell. You got it even before I said it. Everybody agrees Fatal Push is better. Path to Exile is really, really sucky right now because you give mana to your opponent that has Lurus in their deck, so you just get them closer to Lurus. And if they untap with Lurus or they cast Lurus and you cannot deal with it, you're going to die. All the other alternative Condemn or Oust, they're either sorcery speed or they're very narrow, so they can only deal with attacking creatures like Condemn. So Selesnya in that case, for me, is worse. The best thing about the Selesnya is when the matchups are completely unfair. So when you're playing green-white, you can still play Lurus. But if there are things like tip-out nonsense going around, then you can play Deafening Silence on your sideboard. You have the Selesnya cards. You can play Ethersworn Canonist. So you can play cards that stop combo decks, basically. But normally I would say going into an open meta, and right now, creature-heavy meta, I will go for Golgari, for the Fatal Pushes, and also for Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is a very important card versus the very worst matchups. Because Thoughtseizing away a Force of Vigor or a Primeval Titan can be the difference between winning and losing some of the games, right? So Thoughtseize gives you game versus decks you would not have any business winning, and also makes your control matchups even easier, right? Because I think people lose a lot of control matchups because they just jam their creatures and they allow your opponent to get advantage through counter spells, or you basically lose your board and then they can resolve a Planeswalker. But Thoughtseize kind of slow that down, can take their answer from your opponent, and then you can just develop from there. I've been playing Nihilist. We can look at it later if you want, but I also been having some fun with Naya. That's definitely some hotness that I came up with. But that is less, I would say, less competitive, more for fun.
Yeah, you can very, very quickly.
Yeah, have a quick look at it.
This is the closest to Selesnya we're going to get here.
Yeah, so this is
Selesnya, just this.
Yeah, I even play Luminarch Aspirant. Luminarch Aspirant is an interesting card because it allows you to keep, it works through Stony Silence effects, right? And it attacks, unlike Steel Overseer. So with the Hardened Scales, this guy becomes 3/3 on turn 2 and 5/5 on turn 3. So that can actually
That's
pressure a lot
not
of,
bad.
it's not a bad card. And it, like, yeah, in general, I like it because it's a more aggressive of a card. So when you're playing white, it's a card you can consider. I also kind of like the flavor of it a little bit. But the thing with Naya is that you get to play one of the best cards printed for scales that miss the mark and the color ever. Just Showdown of the Skulls. It's like a card from Kalheim. I think if you scroll a bit down, you can see it there. Yeah, Showdown of the Skulls. 4-mana Saga. That when it comes into play, you exile the top 4 cards of your library, and you can cast them until your next turn. And then Chapter 2 and 3 means every time you cast a spell, you get to put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control.
It's very hard. You have huge turns.
Exactly. It's very hard to lose a game if you untap with Showdown of the Skulls and Hardened Skills. All your cards are cheap, so you get to play a lot of them. And every time you play, you can just imagine you can cast a Walking Ballista, and you can cast 2 more spells, and that Walking Ballista is now a 6/6 out of the blue, basically, plus whatever else you got going. I mean, this card is just insane. Yeah, I 4-1 yesterday with this similar version to this. So the deck has legs if you want to have some fun, but I would definitely recommend, if you're trying to be competitive, I would recommend Golgari.
Right. Okay, outside of maybe sideboard cards, what's the general strategy to just shut down a Hardened Scales deck?
So I found the games I lose a lot of times come to Scales is a critical mass deck. So you need a certain amount of artifacts to win. If you play a Ravager, there's nothing on the battlefield. Ravager is a pretty bad card. Ravager is a 2-mana 1/1. That's just simply what it is. So you need to make the game about less cards if you're playing against Scales. So you need to be able to reduce the amount of artifacts I have access to. So one of the ways, for example, that you are probably a hard matchup is because they will attack you and at the same time trade with you. So they will attack with the Soulscar Mage, and if you don't block, they will bolt your creature. So if you are bolting every creature that I play, I have a very hard time making a board that I can, play around your removal spells. On the contrary, if you let me have 3 artifacts and then you Fatal Push one of them, it's super ineffective. Because at worst, I will just, kill you on the spot sometimes, because that can happen. But at best, I will just get the counters on another creature and even on the Ozzy. So maybe you're even helping me. I had a guy the other day who Emrakul me. Like they had a Through the Breach and they played an Emrakul. They attacked me and they sacrificed the Hangouts Walker. I had to sacrifice the Hangouts Walker. And with the Ozzy, that was lethal for the next turn. So, I mean, you cannot, basically, you need to be careful how you use your removal because it can be very inefficient. An important thing is to not tap out if you don't have to versus Scales. Like, I think a lot of people are, like, sometimes they're dead on board and they're tapping out. And if you don't see, like, just to play a random cantrip, I've seen some people sometimes play some, a bit inefficient and may tap out the wrong colors of mana or tap out of a second answer. So I'm like, okay, I can kill you right now. Like, I think you need to keep the fear in the Hardened Scales player because you only have one shot at winning the game as a Scales player. So if you put me out there, then there's nothing I can do. I cannot recover. There's no recovery mechanism in Hardened Scales.
Yeah. So what MrSeri is getting at is it's Hardened Scales sometimes gets in these situations like Splinter Twin where they're going all in on a creature to kill you. Let's say Inkmoth Nexus.
Yeah.
And if you tap out, you give him the green light to just go for it. Whereas if you have some mana up, you represent some sort of removal, and he won't go all in on that turn. He's got to wait another turn, wait for a better spot. So if you tap out, you just give the Hardened Scales player the green light. All right, if we got to kill, we're just going to kill you.
Exactly. So you gotta be careful with that. In general, you should try to keep Ravager off the table. I think Ravager is by far the most important card of Scales. So if you just let it sit there and do its thing and move counters around and stuff, you will probably lose eventually. But yeah, that's my recommendation. It also depends a lot on which deck are you playing.
Of course. This is the second part of this question, but I want to get to more people's questions.
Of course. Maybe I'm going.
Cat Senpai, what do you do against decks that might side in Blight Beetle? I've seen a lot of Jund players sided in for the Heliod Company matchup.
Yeah, I played against Spine Spike the other day, and he did this to me. just play that turn 2 Blight Beetle, and I didn't bring in Final Push. And, you just go to the next game, That's what you normally do. And then you put your 4 Final Pushes in your deck. Because Blight Beetle is, of course, you cannot beat a Blight Beetle. Like, if a Blight Beetle resolves and you don't have any way to deal with it, you don't waste your time, you just go on. Blight Beetle is a hard card to beat, and probably should have talked about it when I talked about good sideboard cards versus skills. This is, of course, an amazing card versus skills. But what you do is you just kill it with the Final Pushes. Notice that this card does say, though, creature your opponent control cannot have +1 that can put on them. But if you already own a ballista, this is just a 1/1, right?
Gotcha.
So this is a very good card early in the game, but later in the game, you can try to beat it anyway, right? Still a very strong card. If you're expecting your opponent to have Blight Beetle, you should have Final Pushes. Or whatever removal you're playing, Dismember, Path to Exile, whatever you're playing, you should play it because, you can just lose on the spot. And that's a bit the tricky part, right, on the sideboarding. And I think generally Magic, you need to sideboard for your opponent's sideboard strategy also. And that can be a bit hard when there are cards that completely wreck you, like Blight Beetle and, to some extent, Collector Roof or Stony Silence. That's why I like to play Phyrexian Score and Ozolys and cards like this that allow me to beat Stony Silence. And I generally don't sideboard for it unless I know my opponent has it.
Mm-hmm.
But with a Blight Beetle, if your opponent's playing creatures, just put your Final Pushes in there just in case they're playing Blight Beetle or Collector Roof. That would be my recommendation. But that's a tough one, Blight Beetle.
Why no Snake if you're already Golgari? I don't know what they're talking about here.
Snake. You're talking about Constrictor, wind something Constrictor?
Oh, Winding Constrictor, yeah.
Winding Constrictor, yeah. That card is just so bad. It has the same problem.
Pioneer All-Star.
Yeah. I played this card in Pioneer. I mean, if this card was a 1/4, it could still play. But the fact that this card is a 2-mana, do nothing, that dies to Bolt, in a format where Bolt is the most played card, it just makes it very irrelevant. Also, Skills doesn't need more enablers. You have 400 skills, 3 to 4 Ozolys, you have 2 animation modules. You have a lot of ways to get counters on things. I think this card is just not necessary for the skills as it is right now.
Why Metallic Mimic over this card?
Because Metallic Mimic solves a problem for the deck, whereas this card is basically just doing more of the same. But this card gives you an extra counter, which is great. But it doesn't impact the board in any other way. Also, it's not an artifact, so you cannot sacrifice it. But
Metallic Mimic actually gives counters to things as they're, even if they were not to have a counter at all.
Exactly. So it allows you to go fast and put a lot of creatures on the battlefield. And of course, Metallic Mimic, if you can name also Servo. And Servo will, for example, you have an animation model, you can make infinity servos. So as many servos you have mana, if you have a Metallic Mimic named Servo, right? So that's why I like the Metallic Mimic better than Servo, better than Winding Constrictor. Also, you could make the same case with a Conclave Mentor, the card that Heliod plays for if you're playing Celestia. But it's the same situation. It's just not a card that does anything that the deck already doesn't do enough of.
Mm-hmm. Hey, what would you do when you play against a Prowess deck, asks Adrian.
So, against, I guess the most common Prowess deck is Blue-Red Prowess, or nowadays the Clever Lumimancer Prowess deck that's also getting some attention. But what I try to do in those matches is I try to trade with my opponent. Because if you realize what your Prowess is doing, I try to kill their creatures basically as fast as I can, is that every creature that they have represents 1 more point of damage that you can take. So if they have 1 Monastery Spear and they cast 3 Manamorphose, you take 3 damage extra. But if they have a Monastery Spear and a Sprite Dragon, you take 6 damage extra. And that's how they kill you, right? Like they play 2 or 3 creatures and then they just use all spells, and the effect compounds. It's exponential. It's not, well, it's linear, but it's really fast that it kills you, right? So what I try to do is, for example, if I'm in the situation where I have a 2/2 Walking Ballista and my opponent has a Soulscar Mage, a lot of times I will try to take the risk and kill that Soulscar Mage with my Walking Ballista right away. When they're tapped out, of course. You shouldn't do this if they're not tapped out. You will not get blown out. So all of a sudden, my opponent has 1 less creature. And if you notice, most of their cards are complete garbage outside the creatures. They do nothing. They're playing cards like Burst Lining, or Mutagenic Growth, Manamorphose even does nothing if they don't have creatures. I mean, of course, it allows them to play a Storming Entity. So especially post-board, what I try to do is like just be very aggressive about removing their creatures and try to not trade one. I made a video on this actually, where I went over 3 UR Prowess matchups and that I got in a challenge. And what I try to do is to not lose value in every exchange. So the way you lose this matchup is that you play a Worker and they play a Lava Dart and they kill it. Okay. Then you play a Hangavak and they kill it. If you're able to gain value somehow, either by having an Ozolith or a Hardened skills, or by having 2 creatures into play, for example, 2 Workers already means that they need to use 2 removal spells. And if they don't have 2 removal spells, you will keep the counters on one of the Workers. So I always try to not play their game. And their game is about having 3 creatures and casting a ton of spells and dealing with all my creatures. I try to get some value and try to reduce the amount of creatures they have, right? So that's how it is a hard matchup anyway. I also bring in Gembracer from the sideboard. That's a very important card. It has reach, and having reach allows it. And if you make an 8/8 or a 9/9 reach creature, they have a very hard time killing you because most of their damage comes from the air, right? So yeah, that's my tips for your prowess. But there's definitely a video where I go over 4 matches and I give some pointers, specific pointers on things to do when you're playing that match. But it's not. Don't be frustrated if you lose it. It took me a very long time to get probably close to a very mediocre win rate against them.
Okay, the natural question asked Tobias, what's your thoughts on Scrap Heap and when will it be more useful than Lurrus?
Is this card like this artifact that's a 2 mana?
Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Yeah, this is a Pioneer All-Star, right? Well, you're playing Modern.
I don't know if he's playing the Hardened Scales version, but
Pioneer's Hardened Scales, it's not very good. I mean, this card is good, and I mean it's a construct and it's a 3/2, but
if we're talking Modern here, we got to do big things. You know, get a little bit of value if it come back from the graveyard. It isn't going to do it, and also it doesn't block.
Paying 2 mana for a vanilla construct, it's you need to be doing something super powerful, right? You need to be doing something that wins the game. I'm paying 2 mana to get a 3/2 into the battlefield. I mean, it's good versus a very grindy deck, but as you said yourself, you have Lurrus, right? So you can just win the game with Lurrus. I think you need to be thinking of reasons to put the cards in your deck, not reasons not to put the cards in your deck. You need to think, why is this card good in my deck? What is it doing? Is it beating down my opponent? Yes, but is that the plan with skills? Not necessarily. You can kill them from 20. It's good to keep the life total, like try to reduce the life total, but it's not necessary that you beat them down like slowly, like an aggro deck, let's say. I know what's going on with my cam. It's doing things.
It's okay. It'll fix itself.
Yeah,
it knows what to
do. But yeah,
we'll go. We'll just go to the next question. If I'm playing against Hardened Scales, what are the biggest threats, and how can I beat Hardened Scales? So, what in your opinion, are the biggest threats?
The biggest threats in Hardened Scales are Urban Ravager. If you're playing basically Urban Ravager, and if you're playing a control deck versus Hardened Scales, Animation Module. Animation Module is the best card against a control or grindy matchups. It's so good, This card, basically, whenever you put a counter on a permanent, including any permanent, including a land that comes with counters, Dano or Reborn, you can pay 1 and make a circle, right? So you basically never run out of creatures. And you make basically you're spending 0 cards to make creatures. You're just throwing your mana into creatures, and your opponent, if it needs to spend cards to deal with your non-cards, eventually you'll just outrun them. And so basically, Ravager in general, Animation Model, if you're a grindy control deck, and if you are a deck that's scared, like it's very light on interaction, you should be wary of Inmoth Nexus. I don't know if I want to reveal this, but I'd never expose my Inmoth Nexus if I have another land to play. That's very hard to pick up when you're playing against someone. But I don't play my Inmoth Nexus as my first land, almost ever. Because I played just the turn before I will go for a kill. Right? So Inmoth Nexus and Ballista are like the fastest kills of this deck, and you should be scared. I had an opponent the other day, the other day was almost 6 months ago when I was in the FNM. It was a Tron opponent, and they just, did the thing with Expedition Map. and I had a ballista in play, and I went Ravager Worker, like make a 10/10 ballista and kill you, right? So you need, those are the cards. Of course, you need to keep an eye on the Ignos Nexus that your opponent has. You need to keep an eye on the Walking Ballistas if you're afraid of dying. But you're afraid of, if you're into the long game, Animation Model is the best card. A lot of times when I'm playing against a control deck, I will play first my Hardened skills and my Oscillates to see if they have Force of Negation, then my Animation Module. Because Animation Model is, like, honestly the better card in the control decks almost.
Right.
In the control matches, basically. Yellow Chair.
Thanks for the question, Yellow Chair.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much you play in Pioneer, but is it worth it to splash energy when also playing Constrictor in Pioneer, Hardened Scales in Pioneer?
To be honest, I tried to make Hardened Skills play in Pioneer, but it just doesn't scratch my Hardened Skills each. You know what I mean? Ballista is banned.
Oh, yeah, it's true. They just... Was it better when Ballista was around?
It was much better when Ballista was around, but it still was not... So in Pioneer, it's an aggro deck. It's not a there is some synergy because you have counters, but that is where the synergy ends. Let's say you're playing cards like Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. You're playing cards like Winding Constrictor.
Banned.
It's banned because of Heliod's scenes. I hope it doesn't happen the same in Modern. If it happens the same in Modern, just, I'm gonna cry so much. Anyway, in Pioneer, I don't really play a lot of Pioneer. I don't really think Skills is really great in Pioneer because it's basically a deck that's trying to play creatures that are bigger than your opponents, but also in Pioneer, one of the better cards is like a 5/4 for 3 mana, right? So you need a lot of counters to beat like a Steel Leaf Champion or anything like that. And in general, when I played it, it just seems that there's also a lot of removal, right? So if you spend a card playing 100 skills, that will make a very bad creature into a passable creature for the meta game, like you turn a 1/1 into a 3/3 or a 2/2 or a 3/3, it's still, if your opponent has the Fatal Push and kills it, that's it. There's no. Of course, you could play the Oswalds, you could play a lot of stuff, but in general, I don't believe that Pioneer's Hardened Skills is a deck that's worth playing. At least, yeah.
Pierre Luca asks, I used to play Affinity, Classic Affinity. I was wondering about playing Hardened Scales. What is the most important difference between these two decks? Is Hardened Scales more skill intensive than the old Affinity deck?
How to tell? It is more technical, I would say. Like a lot of the wins on Hardened Skills come from knowing really well your interactions. I guess the same in Affinity, but even maybe to a higher level because you have Proliferate, you have all of these effects going on. The most important difference, I would say, is that Affinity was more of a kill you fast deck. It could grind, but it was more of a kill you fast deck. It was a deck that, thanks to Mox Opal, it will explode and then make a big board very fast and try to kill you before you had like time to react. Also, Affinity was playing a lot of colors, so you could kind of customize it to have like Galvanic Blast or whatever you wanted to play on those senses. Scales is less that. It's more a synergistic deck that kills, I would say, anywhere from turn 4. It can kill turn 3, but mostly turn 4 onwards. And it's not a deck that has a timer on it most of the time. You can kill very, very late in the game and out of nowhere with the way the cards work. So you need to learn not to be Affinity players. If you're I played against Affinity a bunch, and they would generally just go turn 1, turn 2, vomit their hand, turn 3, make a big Inmoth, attack you. Even if they didn't make a 10/10 Inmoth, they realized that going for 3 or 4 more turns didn't increase their odds of winning. At least that's what I saw a lot of times. They would just make a big Inmoth and try to attack you, or try to kill you fast. If you need to get out of this mentality when you're playing Scales, because you get into this mentality, I need to kill you right now. You will actually not kill people because you'll just blown out by a Fatal Push. So I would say that is the most important thing, being patient with your kills. I'm a very patient people. Like when I'm streaming, a lot of people are like, oh, it's lethal. I'm like, yeah, it's lethal, but if my opponent has this and this, and it's not lethal. So I'd rather play it one more turn, and I actually don't feel I'm losing any value by any chances of winning by waiting one more turn or 2 more turns.
Right.
So that's the big difference, I think, between the two decks. Your mentality going into the game needs to be slightly different.
Exactly. All right. So And I think in the end, I would say that Hardened Scales is more skill intensive because as you said, it requires more technical play. You need to be more patient, and you didn't have as many free wins as you did with the Classic Affinity. Like, and in my opinion, any deck that can kill super fast, and that's one of their objectives, makes the deck easier because you don't actually play Magic. You know, if you got those free wins, that's less playing Magic. Whereas Hardened Scales is going to be more forced to play Magic compared to the old Classic Affinity deck.
Play around things.
More turns that go by, the more important.
Exactly. I mean, when I used to play a lot of StarCraft 2, a lot of it was very easy to play a very aggressive strategy that won very quickly, but you were not getting better. Oh, sorry.
Just give me a second here.
No worries. I'll do my stuff.
Okay, I think I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you great. Fantastic.
All right, that's fantastic. So
I was stupid. I was using my earphones all day this morning when I know I have an interview, and now the battery is dying. So
yeah, it's like I work a lot from home nowadays, and if there's not a technical difficulty in every meeting, it's rare. There is not technical difficulties in every meeting, basically.
Okay, yeah, how is your matchup versus Eldrazi Tron?
My matchup is good. I win a lot. But also, but I win a lot against every deck. And I'm kidding. But Eldrazi Tron is better than people think, because in paper, if you look at the deck, you're like, how can you ever win this? The reality is that Chalice of the Void, it's not as good as skills because you have Throne of Death. You can proliferate their chalices. That's an important skill to have, to remember to proliferate their Chalice of the Void. A lot of the free wins that Eldrazi Tron gets is from this Chalice of the Void on 1. If you have your decks that are 1-drops, you're screwed. But Hardened Skills can proliferate with both Animation Module, and Throne of Death can proliferate Chalice of the Void. Preferably, you want to proliferate it up to 4, so they cannot play Counter the Great Creator. That has happened sometimes. But also, as I said before, you have a lot of ways to deal with Karn. You have Phyrexian Core. You have Blinkmoth and Inkmoth Nexus, which both can be activated and attack Karn. And, sometimes they don't have turn 3 Tron. I know it's rare. I know it doesn't happen that often. But sometimes Eldrazi Tron players draw 7 and they keep it and they don't have turn 3 Tron. And those games are generally easy because they're just playing like one dumb dude after another, Like they're playing a Matter Reshaper. Matter Reshaper turn 3 is embarrassing for Modern. Like if this is their play turn 3, that or turn 4, sometimes I've seen that too, it's not very good. If they're trying to play a Ballista and they play a 1-1 or a 2-2 Ballista, you laugh. You're like, huh, I have a 10-10 Ballista. You know what I mean? So the worst.
That ain't a Ballista. This is a Ballista.
This is a Ballista. That's the one that she told me not to worry about. But the reality is, you can lose this. The way you lose feels really bad because they will go turn 3 Tron or something like this, or turn 2 Thorned Seer, turn 3 Radius Smasher, turn 4 Radius Smasher, something like this. And then, of course, you'll not have time. But if they give you time to set up, so they don't kill you the first 3 turns, like by playing a turn 3 Counter Great Creator into a Pithing Needle or something like that, or a Snaring Breach that already locks you, then you normally have a pretty good match. So the matches the times you lose, it feels terrible, but a lot of times you will beat them because they will not get these super good draws. But of course, there will be, and I think that's Modern in general. You need to accept that sometimes your opponent will have turn 3 Tron, have the Counter Great Creator. You'll do everything you can to deal with it, and they will follow it up with second tower, Counter Great Creator, get back a Ballista, get a Ballista to 3-3, and now you lost. That happens, but then just play another game and put Gems in your deck and show them, doing the thing. So,
I'm just browsing through the questions here. Yes, we will do Decklist review today, although I am going to prioritize any Hardened Scales lists that exist. So if you submit a Hardened Scales list, you're definitely going to get preference. Oh, is it possible to play Heliod in Scales?
One of the things that happened when Mox Opal was banned is people tried to make Heliod work in Hardened Scales by playing 4 Metallic Mimics, playing Ballista and Hangalag Walker, and playing Collected Company with Heliod and Spike Feeder. So you could Collected Company you had a mimic in play, naming construct, you could collect the company and get a ballista and put it into play with a counter. And then with Heliod, of course, and Hardened Scales, it's very easy to win. And, it's a little known fact, actually. I mean, I didn't know if I was going to say this, but the current list of Heliods, you can look at one of my 5-0s, and I was one of the first ones to actually make Heliod the deck that's today. Because before me, people were not playing Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl. And they were not playing Conclave Mentor in their decks.
Yeah, I noticed you did play some Heliod Company
you can
a little
see
bit
that, right?
earlier,
So this is
a
early.
little bit later in the year before you went back to Scales.
Yeah, so this is, you see there is like a 28th of August. That's pretty early for those times. And you can see here, already playing Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl. That was not common before. And you can see I was still playing Hardened Scales in that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that, Utopia Sprawl and Arbor Elf are great together, of course. And 4 mana is great when you're trying to play Collect the Company. And, I had some amazing record at those times. Me and another player from the Hardened Scales Discord was called Bullant. I mean, I think I tracked my first 30 matches with Heliod, and I was something like 26-4 or something like this. Really insane. I mean, of course, the deck is busted, but we didn't know that at the time.
Right.
I was one of the few playing Heliod at that time, and it was just great. And then they played into the Skyclave Apparition, and then the deck became very uninteresting for me because, everybody plays it now, and it's just not that much. Like before they printed Skyclave Apparition, you need to figure out how to win through hate. Like Graphic Escape, Pithing Needle, Torpor Orbs kind of stop you. But now you just play Skyclave Apparition, and unless they have Torpor Orb, it doesn't matter what they have, right?
Yeah.
So, but it was so funny at that time, people didn't understand the interaction with Spikefield and Conclave Mentor. So a lot of times I was getting free wins by attacking with one. They would not realize I could make infinite power and just win at the moment. Other times, for sure. So you can play Heliod in Scales, but the thing is, what are you trying to do with it? If you're playing only, like you're taking the normal Hardened Scale shell and you put Heliod, I mean, you will get some wins from it for sure, but has very little synergy outside of those wins. You're not playing Auriok Champion. You're not playing. The reason Heliod is good is because it's both an engine for the Heliod deck and it's the win condition.
Yeah.
So it allows you to put counters on things when you gain life and you have a lot of life gain, and allows you to put lifelink on a creature to gain life, put counters, and on top of that, it allows you to kill with Ballista or Spike Feeder. That's why the card is so good. That's why the deck is so good.
Mm-hmm.
If the card only did the Spike Feeder thing and did none of the other stuff, somehow, I don't know, it would not be so good, right? So if the card only did the Walking Ballista combo, if that's the only thing you will be playing in the deck, it loses a lot of its shine, in my opinion. But you can try it. I always tell people that give me ideas. I mean, I don't have time to try everything. I already have too many ideas of my own. Like, I really like playing some random stuff and skill shells. So, but you just go try it. And if it's good, let me know and I will copy it and claim it.
Right.
Maybe to be.
Dream Purple Floyd asks, can we address the fact that Nikachu didn't mention Hardened Scales in his hardest modern deck to play tier list video? To be fair,
Please.
I very likely should have included it, including Mono Blue Tron, since there are some people playing winning with Mono Blue Tron when there's very few Mono Blue Tron decks out there. But it sort of slipped through. Well, whatever. Sometimes when you design a video, you can do all the research you want, but then you're just still going to forget something. So I don't know, maybe there'll be a sequel where I include Hardened Scales Affinity, because I'm well aware that it requires like tons and tons of math. It's not going to be in the easiest modern decks to be or modern decks to play video.
Definitely.
Okay, let's get into some deck list review. But before we do that, where can people find you, MrSeri, if they want to learn more about Hardened Scales?
That's the perfect place to go. No, you can follow me on both Twitch and YouTube. I am at MrSeri MTG, as I put here on the screen. I basically make YouTube videos 2 or 3 times a week, maybe 4 times a week, mostly gameplay videos, and they're normally rips from my stream.
Mm-hmm.
I try to cut off the fluff. And from time to time, I make like videos going over specific matches, something I've been doing a lot lately, and I encourage people to do, and somehow people are not following through, is that I ask people to send me their replays, so you can replay. you can take basically record yourself playing Hardened skills.
Yep.
I'll look at it and comment it and give
Amazing.
you pointers. And I think this was very successful, the first trial I made. So I think people liked it. I just need more replays, mates. Just send me those replays. I will
send him the replays. He'll look at your videos, your gameplay, and give you, like, I mean, it's basically free coaching.
Free coaching, you know, it doesn't cost you any money. Exactly. That's basically it. On what do I do? I'm also very active in the Discord Hardened Skills server. I talk, put my opinions there. I'll give advice to everyone. I think it's one of the better Discords out there. There's a great moderation going on, and you know, people. It's probably one of the most helpful places, you know, in terms of Discord that are free. You know, like people that have tons of experience with that they'll give you advice on the deck, including myself. You know, I think that's a great place to connect if you want to. And you want to catch me live, I answer all the questions. I will do this coaching for you on YouTube if you let me. And yeah, that's basically where you can find me. You can also find me in the Modern Leagues if you want to play against Hardened Skills.
That's right. So I have links to everything that you can find MrSeri in the description below. Definitely, if you love Hardened Scales, you want to learn more about this archetype on a deeper level, go give him a subscription on YouTube, follow him, leave a follow on Twitch. And of course, you can find him in the Discord community. I have also links to that in the description below. All right, so we're going to get into Decklist review. Now, normally it is, you have to leave the command !review deck, give the URL. But today, if you put scales at the end of the URL, like URL space scales, I will definitely showcase this deck list. And don't give me like, a complete stock scales list might be a little bit boring. So if you've got like something a little bit more interesting that might catch the attention of MrSeri, that would be great. But okay, so if you want to submit a list, any list, because if we have no scales list, then whatever, we're just going to
it's a bit tough
review a regular list. Go into my description, join my Discord. In my Discord, I have a channel called Decklist Review, and then use the command !review deck space, give the URL to the deck list space. Either if you have a scales list, write scales. If you don't, then whatever, you'll still be eligible for potentially deck list review today, and it'll be at random. And as we wait for people to submit their deck lists, going to quickly thank my sponsors, FusionGamingOnline.com. You know, we're getting to the point where we can start playing some paper Magic in the horizon. We see it. It's happening. You can't play without sleeves, people. You need sleeves. You need to get back into paper Magic. The prices of cards going up. You're going to need deck boxes, sleeves, and binders for all those cards. You can find them at Fusion Gaming Online. 20% off all gaming accessories. Don't forget, if that 20% off is not enough for you, well, I got some good news. You can get an extra 5% off when you use coupon code Nikachu at checkout. Lets them know I sent you and gives you some value. Of course, there's Mana Traders. I mean, if you're curious about Hardened Scales, I mean, the deck is doing very well for MrSeri, and if you want to just take a, you know, how can I put it, like, dip your foot in the pool before plunging in, you can always rent the deck with Mana Traders. See if this is the right deck for you. And you can, of course, support the channel using my Mana Traders link in the description below, or you can save 15% off your first 2 months using my coupon code Nikachu. Oops. Come back. All right, so let's see what we got. I'm just going to browse. Okay, we do have an aggro scales, the amazing Wally. Congratulations, you are not so randomly picked for deck list review. But I don't care. We have a Hardened Scales master here. So let's look at a Hardened Scales deck list. All right, so aggro scales modern. Let's see what makes it aggro. We've got Arcbound Ravager, Ornithopter, Steel Overseer, Vault Scourge, Walking Ballista. So it actually looks like almost like normal affinity. Cranial Plating, Springleaf Drum, the Ozolith, Throne of Guests. So we got a little bit of blur between the two. Two Fling. I'm not a huge fan of Fling personally. Galvanic Blast, Snake Skin Veil, which you actually had as a 1-of in your deck. We didn't address this. Instant, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end of turn. So it's like Veil of Summer for everything. minus the card draw. Land, Blink, Moth Nexus, Darksteel Citadel, Glimmer Void, Spire of Industry, 4 Hardened Scales. An aggro build of scales based on the old affinity build to go tall and fling or wide and blast. So what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, my first thought is that you're playing 16 lands. That's a bit short.
Okay.
I think you should be playing a few more. In my skills decks, I always play around more than 20, at least 22, if not 23, 24.
Interesting. Okay.
Also, you're playing Glimmer Void as one of them, which can be a bit tricky if you're not playing any welding jars.
Right.
So I would recommend playing some welding jars. I would definitely recommend playing some more lands, maybe some basics, like that would probably be a good idea. I know you're playing Springleaf Drum, but you do need a land to cast the first Springleaf Drum, right?
Right.
So I would recommend that.
Would we replace Springleaf Drum with lands, or what would we replace with lands?
Well, I would probably cut a few. Like, you probably don't need 4 Snakeskin Bales and 2 Flinks. Maybe you can play Flink. One card that I've been liking a lot that is like Flink is Kazul's Fury. It's basically a land that enters tap as a red source, and also is a Flink effect. That card, I played it sometimes in some red-green. It's Kazul's, something like this. I don't know.
Where's Kazul? Oh, there's so many Furies out here.
That's like, yeah, it's a deck, it's a game for children, so we put a lot of Fury. So basically, it's a guy throwing, here it is.
Oh, there we go.
It's a pretty hilarious card, you look at it. Because you get both the Cliffs and the Fury in the same card. So you get a land that's also Fling effect. So that can allow you to play.
Okay, I see. Okay.
You can play a few more lands, even though it's an enter tap. It allows you to have the tap lands and, do the more explosive storms where you go like, we can sacrifice a creature. I would definitely play Hangabug Walker. Hangabug Walker is one of the better cards in the deck. So you're playing Omnitutor and Vault Scourge. And I know the reason that you're playing them is because you're playing 4 Cranial Platings. But if you play a Sack Outlet, Doctor makes a lot of Vault Scourges. They're not having lifelink. But if you have a 3/3 Hangabug, it turns into 3/3 1/1s, right? Fly. So definitely keep the Hangabug Walker in there. Maybe cut the Omnitopters or the Vault Scourges. Probably the Scourges, right? Because you want the Omnitopter with the drum to get its explosive starts,
right.
I assume. Trying to emulate the good times of Monk's Opal. But yeah, the list looks cool. I mean, it's something you can definitely try. I've tried some things like this with playing Mono Blue Affinity, something similar. But the idea is good. You just need to realize that in today's modern metagame, you probably need to play Welding Jar somewhere here. I'll probably cut, maybe some amount of Cranial Plating, some amount of Snakeskin Bales. But Welding Jar is great because it always trades up on mana. So your opponent will have a Fala Push and you'll have a Welding Jar for free. That increases the chances of you untapping with Steel Overseer. So as a general rule, the more Steel Overseers you play, the more Welding Jars you want to play. They go kind of hand in hand because they work really well together. But so you can cut a few Snakeskin Bales, play a few Welding Jars. They can also be Sack Outlets, like Sack Food for your Ravager later on. But yeah,
Someone's
definitely
asking,
interesting concept.
Blink Moth and Ink Moth lands, or just the ones with poison. Like, is there room to put Ink Moth Nexus in here?
Oh, it doesn't have Ink Moth Nexus. Yeah, I mean, Ink Moth Nexus is better than Blink Moth Nexus in scales. In general, I would say Ink Moth Nexus is the better card. You're playing Darksteel Citadel, which has some usage in skills decks. Allows you to, of course, sacrifice it for 2 counters, but Ink Moth Nexus is just the better card. I have a lot of builds where I play both 4 Blink Moths and 4 Ink Moth Nexuses. And you could, for example, change the Darksteel Citadels for Ink Moth Nexus and keep the Blink Moth Nexuses. Because Blink Moth Nexus is a Darksteel Citadel in disguise. You can always activate Blink Moth Nexus to sacrifice it. Yeah. Right? So that gives you the flexibility of having both the creature that can attack and the sack fodder later in the game if you want to. But yeah, cool list. I mean, I like the 4 Snakeskin Bales. I saw at least the 5-vote ones that played 4 Snakeskin Bales and 4 Stonecoil Serpents to be a very aggressive version of Scales. So we just try to push damage through, let's say. Nice.
All right, very interesting build. Thank you very much to, who is this? The Amazing Wally. Thanks for submitting that one, Amazing Wally. It's actually a more interesting discussion than I thought there was going to be. All right, where else in my incredibly biased I don't think there's going to be any more bias stuff. So someone just
Mhm.
I just randomly asked for scales. Okay, well, looks like there is going to be one random person
That's fine.
today. Okay, we got Ruckux, it's modern. Naya Prowess. Oh, God.
No. Naya Prowess.
No, this is not what I'm upset about, though.
Okay.
It's deckstats.net. How dare you? How dare you?
What is deck
Ruckux.
stats?
Don't you know? Don't you know, Ruckux? This is the worst. This is the worst of all the sites to submit
Because it doesn't
on
highlight.
Decklist review. Look at that gigantic ad that they put here. They could have put a Decklist here. Whatever. All right, we got. I'm sure we have a fine mana base. It looks like it's a Naya Prowess deck. So we got 4 Apostles Blessing, 4 Blossoming Defense. That's interesting. So that's an interesting idea. 4 Burrow's Charm, 4 Gut Shot, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Mutagenic Growth, 4 Vines of the Vastwood, 4 Clever Lumimancer, 4 Swift Spirit, 4 Leonin Light Scribe, and then we have a sideboard. So, well, initially, what are your thoughts, MrSeri?
Um, I like the mana base, but I don't really. I always start looking at the mana bases for decks. I think this is often overlooked. But if you look at this, you're playing 12 fetch lands. Maybe you don't need 12 fetch lands. It's fine to play fetch lands, but your color requirements are actually not that hard. You're not playing any double colored spell in your deck.
Oh, there's one.
Only red, only green and red, and a bit of white, right? So you could play mostly cards that are tapping only for red and sometimes for white and sometimes for green.
Yep.
That would be my suggestion. So you don't kill yourself basically by all this fetch shocking. And I like the list. It's really interesting to see all the options that Clever Lumimancer opens, right? Because all these free spells that we have in Modern. What I don't like is Leonin Light Scribe. I think this card only works well if your other creatures survive, and if your other creature survives, you already are winning. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I was gonna add on to that in exactly this. I think you need more creatures in this deck to even use this card. So if you're gonna play 12 creatures in your deck, you might as well have Soulscar Mage, because this only works if you have a lot of creatures, at least 1 or 2 more other creatures in play to really get a benefit out of it. But you have 12, so what's gonna happen is you play Clever Lumimancer, they kill it, then you play Leonin Light Scribe, and then it's just like a 2 mana prowess creature for the most part, not really worth your time to be playing this thing. And then in the end, then you should just have been playing like Soulscar Mage in the first place.
Yeah, and one thing you're missing in this deck, it's a Lurus. I know it's kind of funny,
yeah,
but
there's not a single Lurus in here. You're right. Yeah,
you should be
that's a
playing
reroll.
Lurus.
Where's our Lurus?
I know it's boring to always see the same card in every single deck, and why is there a card here? Well, you already have a card, so whatever. But you need to play Lurus, I think. Maybe you don't even need to play. I think a lot of people are getting very caught up on playing Mishra's Bubble with Lurus. And this, of course, Clever Lumimancer and Leonin Life Scribe doesn't work with the Mishra's Bubble, so maybe you don't want to play Mishra's Bubble. That's okay. Still, as a 4-mana play, getting Lures into play plus Clever Lumimancer back is still really, really strong, right? So I would play Lurus, and I would play at least 14 creatures. I've seen these decks always play around more than 12. They play 14. You could play. I would recommend playing, if you're playing a 2-drop, Abbot of Keep, or if you want to keep the Leonin Light Scribe, play the Soulscar Mages.
Yeah, we have Abbot of Keep. I think is an excellent 2-drop.
Yeah, this card
also has prowess, but is also card advantage, which is exactly what these types of decks really want.
Good. And where are they playing Manamorphose? Probably also when I play Manamorphose.
Manamorphose. And maybe you can replace Vines of the Vastwood with that. I'm not thrilled with Vines because you need to hold up 2 mana to give it the kick. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Vines is good in that way, but these decks want to be more mana efficient, and this requires 2 mana to pull off, and it needs to be double green. Otherwise, you're just using it to protect your creatures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Vines of Vastwood used to be played in Scales as well. The guy that introduced it to Scales was here in the chat, like hands down. He was the first one that played Vines of Vastwood in Scales, and it was a quality of life improvement. But now Snakeskin Bill has made it even better. But I know it's kind of maybe turning it into another deck, but you could also play Lava Dart in this deck. So both Lava Dart, I like the idea of the protection spells, but you have so few creatures. your opponent will not follow push a 1/1. Like I never, like maybe they will, but if you attack with you always need to cast a spell to trigger Clever Lumimancer and be aggressive with it, right? So if half your spells are protection spells, you always want to be reactive with those cards. So in that sense, I would play less protection spells and more cards that are proactive, like Lava Dart.
Right? I don't mind the Blossoming Defense because it's not the most proactive card, but it's at least a little proactive while also giving yourself some defense. But yeah, we are like purely reactive here with a lot of Apostle's Blessing. Vines of the Vastwood, I guess, can be proactive. So maybe between cutting Vines or Apostle's Blessing, I might be first to cut Apostle's Blessing.
Yeah, I would probably play, exactly. I would play maybe 4 to 6 protection spells around those. Play a few more creatures, play Manamorphose, play Lava Dart. So you are much more proactive deck. Also, Manamorphose draws a card, so it gets you a bit closer to your second creature.
Yeah.
And it can fix your mana in a 3-color deck, which could be important. Like even though you're playing a lot, you could probably get away with playing less fetch lands if you're playing Manamorphose as well. Because in the case you want to play a Boros Charm, you could just, and you don't have white, you could always, filter your mana with Manamorphose. And that's a secret use of Manamorphose that people forget. You can fix your mana.
How much do we like this sideboard? I don't get this. Skull. I feel like this is an awkward sideboard.
Yeah.
Like Skull Crack, what is this for? Sometimes people are like, well, it will stop Helid Company. Well, maybe for one turn. But like you gotta, what about the next turn? Like at your upkeep or something. Can't hold up Skullcrack for forever.
No.
And I don't know if Leyline, I don't know the difference between Leyline or the Void or Rest in Peace for this sort of deck, because if we throw Lurrus in here, then maybe Soul Guide Lantern is better. It will also trigger prowess for most of the creatures.
Yeah. Sometimes you also need to think if you're cutting spells that are proactive in your deck to play a Leyline that will stop your opponent, why are you doing that? Like, I mean, if you're playing in Stretch, maybe you're afraid of Creeping Shields and stuff. But I think often the best plan is just to kill them, And I feel you probably want to do something that kind of somehow helps you in your plan. Like, as you said, Soul Guide Lantern still triggers prowess. So you can play a Soul Guide Lantern, trigger prowess, kill your opponent, and still hold that graveyard hit with you, right? I don't really get also the post-mortem launches.
Triggers prowess.
It does trigger prowess, it's true.
Does it give haste?
Yeah, it does give haste, but you exile it at the end of turn, right?
Yeah, so I don't. Basically, they're like banking that this is going to win right now, that one turn. But like whatever, Lurrus is probably going to do a decent job anyway.
But actually, the more I look at it, I like it because it gives haste to like a Clever Lumimancer, right?
Oh yeah, so maybe they tapped out on their turn, and like they play Liliana. Edict, sack. Who plays Liliana now? But basically, sorcery speed, kill your creature, post-mortem lunge, and then maybe you can kill him. Maybe that's possible.
Yeah, it's not awful, definitely. But again, you're playing very few creatures and no card draw on your deck, so you need to. Yeah, if the creature gets exiled, for example, post-mortem lunge is a. But I like the idea. I think this kind of decks have a lot of. We are not done exploring these new prowess decks. With both Leonin Lightscribe, Clever Lumimancer specifically, and protection spells, free spells. There's a lot of those in Modern, and who knows?
All right, we're gonna put a thumbs up on Postmortem Lunge. That's an experiment waiting to happen. Definitely put in Lurrus. Take out Skullcrack, and take out Skullcrack for something else, because this just like I'm not sure if Spencer, this is your list. Helid on the draw, that is not going to do it. You're going to get steamrolled by Helid anyway. Skullcrack or no Skullcrack.
Yeah. Gutshot is as good as Skullcrack.
Yeah, Gutshot is a great card against it because they go to activate. You have Gutshot in here.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be too afraid of Helid because they go to activate the Spike Feeder. They remove a counter. They only have one counter left. You Gutshot it there. You've solved the problem.
Exactly. And I think it's a actually, I'm not sure how good the prowess matchup is for those Helio decks, honestly, if they don't have like the nuts, because they're relying on Utopia spell openings. Because if Arborov is not going to survive, against a gut shot Lavadar deck. I probably would side them out if I was them. So they're like relying on either Utopia Sprawling into turn 3, into turn 2 Heliod, into turn 3 Infinite Life, or they're relying on having a lot of removal, like Path to Exile, which is certainly very bad, or like something like a Conclave Method to block. So I do think that you probably have a pretty good matchup against those decks, unless they have like the perfect start and you have nothing in your hand. But then you should mulligan. But yeah, the Skullcrack definitely will not help you against the Heliod. But Lavadar can. I don't know what people are playing in your prowess. I even think, like, you're playing white. If you're really worried about Heliod, you could play this side. I know it's a bit of a meme, but this side just deals with the Heliod in like forever, right? Like it's literally what it was meant to do. So that's a card you can play. But
Spencer actually had some additional insight to his list. I was so creature light. If I lost one, I swept, so I added vines. Yeah, but one way to beat creature removal also is just play more creatures. So overload their removal by a little bit. That's why you see like the Is It Prowess deck. They have 16. They have 16 creatures that you have to deal with. Now, mind you, 2 of them are pretty big, Stormwing Entity, but they have more creatures than generally a lot of decks have removal.
Exactly. The situation here will be that you will not play your 1-drop because you're afraid of the removal. So you'll wait for your turn, right? But you'll wait for your second turn to play your 1-drop and hold up your like defensive spell, and then the opponent will not remove your creature. So you will be in the same situation again. That if you will need to cast your spell in order to trigger prowess, but casting your spell turns your shields down because you maybe only have 1 protection spell. I would say, if your opponent Fado pushes you in their turn, then you lose that prowess trigger and the blossoming defense effect, right? So I like the idea of having a few more creatures, Manamorphose and Lavadar somewhere in there, but the protection spells are cool, and I think I could see myself losing to this. Like turn 1, Clever Lumimancer.
I can see myself losing this too.
You're dead. You're dead so quickly versus kind of decks like Boros Charm. Mutagenic Growth is already what, 7 damage, like 14 damage on turn 2.
Yeah,
easy.
And Apostle's Blessing. I was going to recommend Crash Through as a way to push through damage, but maybe Apostle's Blessing can do some pseudo amount, because like a deck like this will always have trouble beating, say, tokens that are just going to chump block it. That's why Temur Battle Rage is so key to the Shadow deck, because if they can't beat just random blockers, they can just die in the long game. Apostle's Blessing could, in fact, give yourself protection from whatever blockers there are in front, and then you'd be able to get in your damage. But traditionally, a lot of these decks are also playing Crash Through. So just something to keep in mind. And I don't think you need a lot of Crash Throughs. You can just use 2.
Yeah.
But, it's something, give your creatures trample and you draw cards. It's not card disadvantage.
And also, I think this guy, hands down, recommends playing Scale Up. Scale Up with Lumimancer is pretty, Lorenzo also. It's pretty hilarious, right? Because you get the Prowess trigger or whatever, the Magecraft trigger, and you also the creature becomes a 6/6 or something like this, right? So you make an 8/9 for 1 mana.
Instead of Skullcrack, you can use Zendikar Rising Enchantment. But what is that enchantment called?
It's called Valakut's Awakening. No, Valakut's. I don't remember. There is a 1 mana that says players can gain life. Valakut Explore. No. Or maybe it's not even Valakut.
I do not know.
Rolling Vortex is called that card, right?
Oh, is it Rolling Vortex? Yeah, that maybe.
Let's see.
Oh yeah, it's probably Rolling Vortex.
Yeah, that's a card. People sometimes use this against Heliod, but you also, same issue, you need to keep mana up to prevent life gain.
Yeah, you have to always keep up that mana, keep up that tax. They can beat you down. I've been up against Heliod, and they just put creatures in play and then start attacking me with a 5/5 indestructible creature, and like, okay then.
You lose.
I've controlled the combo, but I've not controlled the creatures.
Yeah. And on top of that, they're playing Gamony Townships now. So if they
Right.
have Conclave Mentor, it becomes scary pretty quickly. I don't love Governing Township. I think it's a mistake to play Tool like they're doing, but I just they're going all in. I think they should be playing Pendlehaven.
Right.
Pendlehaven is very good. Yeah.
That was a great list. I hope some of that feedback was great. And that's going to be it for Coffee and MTG for today. That was I think this was a great interview. Again, if you want to learn more about Hardened Scales Affinity in Modern, because he's winning with it, you go check out MrSeri. Follow him on Twitter. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel. Be part of that Hardened Scales community because it's at like 0.05 or 0.06% of the metagame. It can be a lot higher. I think this is still a very underrated deck. It's got a lot of explosive games, and there are enough fair matchups out there. And also as a good matchup against the best deck in the format. I was killing it in 2020 with Merfolk because there is Uro decks all over the place. It is really beneficial to have a very good matchup against the best deck in the format. Let me tell you that, because when you play against it, 3 to 4 times, like 2 to 3 times in a league, 3 to 4 times in a modern challenge or any big open event, I mean, that can carry you to top 8s. It absolutely can. Any final words, MrSeri?
No, not much. I mean, want to thank you for having me here. One of the reasons I started a YouTube channel was because I didn't find content like yours for the deck I like, right? So you were a big inspiration for me to start. I probably don't remember. I even messaged you on Facebook asking you for tips, like what should I do? I had like, I just started, so you told me to be consistent.
You're not the only one. I don't really remember because I do get a lot of people asking me, hey, how do I get into content creation? I was an inspiration for a lot of people who specialized in certain archetypes.
Exactly, and you told me to be consistent, and I've been, and definitely, like, I can see how more and more people are getting interested in the deck. And the only reason the deck is not more represented in the top tiers is because there's just so few people playing it.
Yeah,
it is like this.
Always be a reason.
I almost always recognize the person that 5-0s with the deck. So there are maybe 4 or 5 players that are 5-0ing consistently, and there's not that many more that are playing the deck other than us. So come join us. We'll make you better, and you will beat Hewlett all the time.
Excellent. All right. So that's going to be it for Coffee and MTG today. If you want to support Coffee and MTG, you can, well, first off, you can always find the replays. If you weren't here from the beginning, you're going to want to see this whole thing. This was a Hardened Scales masterclass. You can go find it at Nikachu MTG Streams. This is my alternate YouTube channel. But yeah, if you want to support Coffee and MTG, no, forget. Also, we do this Monday to Friday, 9:00 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you can't get enough of Coffee and MTG, if I didn't get to your questions or comments or your deck list, we do this every day of the weekday of the week. And if you want to support the channel, you can leave a sub at twitch.tv. You can also support the channel at patreon.com, or you could also join on YouTube. Those are all acceptable ways of supporting the show. So I'm going to thank everybody. I'm going to thank MrSeri for showing up today, but I'm also going to thank all of you who showed up today with your comments, your questions, your attention, making us a part of your daily routine, because without all of you, this would be no show. It wouldn't be very interesting without the audience being here, part of the show live. So keep brewing that coffee, and we'll keep brewing up the magic, and I'll see you all next time.